left. I'm trying to make a video. Hi everybody, thanks for clicking on the video today. Today we're going to talk about ambulance electrical systems. I have some experience because I turned that thing from a full-fledged ambulance into my home. And so through survival and necessity, I figured out how an ambulance wiring system and electrical system works so that I could modify it to fit my needs. So I want to help other people. Either you've got an ambulance, you're thinking about buying one, because I do get a lot of comments and questions from folks out there, a lot of questions about the electrical system, and because I've been through it, I think that I can help. So let's dig into, I'm going to go over as much of the details of my truck and electrical systems as I've come to understand them. So going back in time, when I got my truck, I had very limited instructions. I got a few sentences from the guy that I bought it from. I drove from New York down to Fayetteville, Arkansas, met this guy Jason in the parking lot of a Lowe's, spent 10-15 minutes with him. He told me what he knew about the truck. I paid him the money I owed him, and I took off back to New York. So I was kind of on my own on how to figure this out. Again, it still was a full ambulance when I got it. It was missing some items. It was missing the inverter. It was missing like a vacuum pump, but the wiring remained, especially the wiring for the inverter. You know, the big fat battery cables were just in the cabinet over there, but no inverter, and they were taped off with some gauze, I guess because it was an ambulance. There was gauze over the end of the wires and then a bunch of electrical tape kind of sealing them off. So I couldn't even look at, okay, this is the inverter and this is how the wires go into it, so that I could upgrade it with another inverter. I didn't have any experience, so I didn't know how they were hooked up. That's not going to work, Lefty. Sorry about that. Okay, so one of the main reasons why I started this YouTube channel and have tried to record a lot of the things that I've done, you mother. So one of the main reasons why I started this YouTube channel was to help people that were going through the same thing that I was. I was just lost when I started, and if I can help people, and I know just from comments I've received and emails from people thanking me for straightening them out on some things, that's why I started this channel. You know, I'm not making a ton of money, barely any money from this YouTube channel. It's all so that I can help you guys feel like you got somebody on your side when you're going to do your ambulance work. So a lot of the questions I get are about the electrical systems, and that's why I want to talk about this in as much detail as I can to help give some clarity to people, because I get some of the same questions over and over. So one thing that I want to say up front before we dig into this, if you're not comfortable with 12 volt and 120 volt wiring, if that's not in your skill set, please don't attempt to do something that you're not familiar with and don't know how to do. You're dealing with a lot of power here, and the last thing that I want to see happen is, because of an error or a misunderstanding, that your truck gets damaged, has a fire. These battery banks are putting out enough power to burn one of these trucks to the ground. It's happened to people, not specifically ambulances, although I'm sure it has, but people's rigs have caught on fire because of a problem with wiring. These systems have a lot of power. So if you're not comfortable doing it, it's outside of your wheelhouse, please seek out someone that is a trained professional, somebody that knows how to do it, and get their help. I want to say that up front. I don't want anybody to get hurt, and I don't want to see your rigs and all your financial investment and your hard work go up in smoke, literally. Let's start by talking about how an ambulance is designed to operate when it's an ambulance. So it's an ambulance is a box that's basically an add-on to a factory vehicle. So a couple of terms I'm going to use are van, and when I say van, I'm referring to, in my case, the Ford part of the truck. The front end is a Ford van, and the frame and the suspension, that's a Ford van. And when I say house, I'm talking about the box. Mine's a Marquee. Yours could be a Marquee. It could be a safety line. It could be any manufacturer. So van is the truck part, and house is the box. Okay. So I'm going to use those terms as we go through this. So an ambulance is designed as an add-on, and think of this as two systems. You've got a van system and you've got a house system for electrical. Okay? Let's get real clear on that. Two separate and distinct systems. The van system is to start the engine, and that's it. You don't want those battery or batteries, depending on how many you have, you don't want those batteries at all powering your house, because what'll happen? You're watching TV all night, you're making lattes, you make coffee, you go to start the truck the next day and the batteries are flat and you can't crank the engine. You don't want that to happen. So in my case, and again I'm going to be talking about what I did here, I have two separate systems. I have the van system and I have the house system. And I'm going to talk about how I did those and how I separated those systems. Because in a factory stock configuration, an ambulance only has one system. It only has one system. So think about this. A van like mine has two batteries. There's one under the hood, and then there's a second battery right in the bottom of this box here. They're usually along the passenger side, along the frame somewhere. Many other rigs like mine, designed like mine, have the two batteries. When you've got the pickup truck series, sometimes there's two under the hood. Sometimes there's two under the hood and a third back here. And they're all tied together. And in mine, my hood battery and my frame battery, they're tied together. And all they do is crank the engine when I turn the key. That's all those two batteries do. That's all I want them to do. Now those batteries are not there to power the inverter. An ambulance is not designed to boondock. An ambulance is designed to always have the engine running when it's in service. So an ambulance pulls up to an accident scene, what have you. The truck sits there and runs while it's being used. The engine and the alternators are outputting the power to power the inverter to run the life-saving equipment. Ambulances are designed to always be running. They are not designed to boondock. This battery back here is not a house battery. It's an engine crank battery. It's not there to run the inverter. Now when I first started working on my truck, I didn't understand that. I thought, like many people, that this one back here, this battery back here, was for the house, and that one was for the engine. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to upgrade this one back here, put 2 or 3 of them. I was already planning on how to modify the box that it was in so that I could add a bunch more batteries, and then that's going to power my house. And then as I started figuring this all out, I said, wait, no, that's tied right to the cranking battery. They're together, and that's all they're there for. So again, let's think of the house and the van as two separate systems, battery systems. Now you can tie them together with what's called the battery isolator, and what that does is it monitors the voltage in the two separate systems and charges them from the engine as needed. I don't have that in my truck because I have solar, so I don't charge my house from the alternators. I don't need it, and I don't have that installed, but you can. If you want to do that, you can install an isolator, DC to DC charger they're called also, and that will allow you to charge your house batteries in addition to charging your cranking batteries from the engine. So because I have the solar system in the truck, I don't need to charge my house batteries from the alternators. There have only been 2 or 3 instances where I have gotten my little generator out to charge my house batteries, and that was in extreme weather conditions where we had really overcast, rainy skies, and I wasn't getting enough solar, and I was using a lot of power. That's typically what it is because I'm very lazy with my power usage, because I have the solar and I know it's always going to recharge. So overcast days, 2 or 3 times I've had to pull out my generator, plug it into my shore power receptacle to charge my house batteries, but like maybe 3 times since last November. So it's kind of a non-issue. So how did I design and separate my 2 systems? So my ambulance, like a lot of other ambulances, it has a main power switch on the side of the driver's seat. A lot of your trucks have that exact same switch. I've seen it on many, many rigs. I've seen it in a couple cases where it's in the center console, but mainly it's on the left side of the driver's seat. That's a main power switch. And what that switch does is it turns the box on. So in a stock configured ambulance, that main switch connects the house to the van's electrical system. It turns it on. The reason why they have that main cutoff switch is when the truck is not in service and not in use, you turn off the house, because inside the house, there are some items that use a little bit of power. So the switch panels are all illuminated, right? So if your truck is sitting for 2, 3, 4 weeks out of service, and those switches, those illuminated switches, are pulling power from your cranking batteries, when you go to need that truck, it might not have enough juice to turn it over. So when the truck went out of service, you throw that switch to off, and it turns the house off. That's what that switch is for. So if you think about that switch, so this is where I gained a huge understanding as I started tracing wires in my truck. This is where I got a big understanding of how they're designed. So that switch, one side of that switch is the van, and the other side of that switch is the house. So really think about that, soak that in. One side of the switch is the van, one side of the switch is the house. So how can you separate those 2 systems? You never turn that switch on. So on the house side, we're going to talk about the house side of that switch. What's on the house side? Coming from the inverter up to that switch, and from that switch going up into your power cabinet. So when you would turn that switch on, it would energize the house side. It would send power to the inverter, and it would also send power inside to your power distribution cabinet. So when I figured that out, that was a big aha moment. So once you understand that that switch is the on-off of the house, you just never turn it on. So my switch is still wired in that same configuration. It's been upgraded with all new wiring, larger gauge and all that, but the same wire path is still there. From the house side of the switch, the wires go down to the battery bank and up into the power distribution cabinet inside the house. I'm going to put a sketch on the screen here so that there's a good understanding, but just remember that that switch is the key to separating the 2 systems, the van and the house. So let's take a second and talk about what kind of system I have installed in the truck, just so you have some context. So my house system consists of a battery bank, 3 batteries that are in the outside left cabinet. I have an inverter, and I have a solar charging system. So those 3 main components are what's in my truck, and are the exact same main components that you're going to want to install in your truck, more than likely. Okay? So let's understand what those 3 things do. The battery bank provides the power for all of my DC powered items that are in the house, and it also provides power to the inverter to run AC powered items. The inverter takes that battery power and turns it into AC for the air conditioner, the laptop, the coffee maker, the microwave, my vacuum cleaner, all of those things that are AC powered come from the inverter. So the battery bank provides the power. The inverter turns the power into AC where needed. And then the solar system charges those batteries. Ah, these flies are biting me. I've never had biting flies. What the f***? Ah, I'm getting eaten up out here. So let's talk about these three pieces. The battery bank. I have 3 Renogy 100 amp hour gel batteries for a total of 300 amp hours. They're wired in parallel, meaning positive to positive, negative to negative. These batteries are connected to the inverter, and they're also connected to that main power switch on the side of my seat. Okay? And then that main power switch goes on into my power distribution cabinet for my 12 volt items. The USB ports, charging my tablet, charging my phone, all of the things that are 12 volt powered. My refrigerator, the Wii Boost, the Max Air Fan, all of the 12 volt items that go into the power cabinet. Power cabinet goes to that main switch goes to the battery bank, the house bank. The inverter, I have an Ames Power 3000 watt, 9000 watt peak inverter with a transfer switch. Now, because ambulances come with the option of shore power that you can plug into the outside of the truck, you need an inverter that has a transfer switch. That gives it the capability to see that AC power coming in and use it inside the house. Okay? A regular inverter does not have the capability to have shore power. So if you're going to plug in at a campground or you're going to plug in your external generator, you need to have an inverter with a transfer switch. They're typically, mine's also a battery charger, and they all typically, it's an inverter charger with a transfer switch. So you plug in shore power or your generator, the inverter charges the batteries from that and uses that shore power to power your TV and your microwave and all those things, okay? So mine's an Ames Power 3000 watt, 9000 peak. So my 9000 watt peak, that allows my air conditioner to start without any problem. My inverter doesn't really have any kind of hiccup when I start the air conditioner. I don't have any kind of soft start item on there, and when I hit the air conditioner on, the inverter doesn't have any kind of problem. It doesn't flash a fault or anything like that. So having that high headroom of peak surge, I think, really helped me with that. Now the solar system that I have on my truck, I have 6 190 watt panels. They're rich solar, so I total 1140 watts on the roof. I have a 100 amp charge controller. It's an EP Ever Tracer series. That's all you need for a solar system: panels and a charge controller. So the way a solar system works, in very basic terms, the panels collect power from the sun, and the charge controller converts that power into something that the batteries can understand. So the panels pull in power and send it to the charge controller. The charge controller does some mojo on it and sends it to the batteries, and it keeps them charged. That's it, basically. A solar system can be an add-on after you already have your inverter system set up, which is what I did in my case. I put my batteries in, I put my inverter in, I had full functionality in the truck. Then a few months later I added the solar system, because the solar system is just to charge the batteries. It doesn't have any effect on the inverter. It's a total separate add-on. So I've had this exact question. Yes, you can put your batteries in, put your inverter in, have a fully functioning system with AC power, then later on add the solar system, because the solar system just attaches onto the batteries and keeps them juiced up, keeps them charged. That's it. In addition to those 3 main systems, there's other items that are used, obviously fuses, circuit breakers, all the wiring. I also have a Victron battery monitor, which keeps track of the state of charge of my batteries from an amperage standpoint. So like right now, it's midday, the sun is finally up over the trees. I looked at my Victron, I'm at about 92% on the way to 100% charging the batteries from the sunlight. Okay, so Victron battery monitor, and there's other ones out there that allow you to monitor your battery state of charge, temperature, things like that. So there's other smaller components that are part of the solar system, but the main components are the panel and the charge controller. Now that we know what kind of equipment I have in there, how is that power then distributed to the house? For the AC power, for the wall outlets that you plug into, I utilized the existing wiring that was in the truck. I did upgrade the wiring that comes from the Leviton, the shore power plug. That wiring going into the inverter, I upgraded it based on the recommendation from the inverter. It's a larger gauge wire. I think it was 14 gauge, 3 elements, so 14.3. And then out of the inverter, same thing, I upgraded the wiring that goes to the breaker box, the AC breaker box. It's a 15 amp breaker box that was in the truck when I got it. It's behind the driver's seat. So from the breaker box out to the wall outlets is the factory wiring that was in the walls already. I did replace the wall outlets with more modern ones that also have the USB charging ports in them. So I can plug in plug in the microwave and then plug in a USB cable to charge my phone or whatever. Now for DC power, the battery bank is wired up to that main switch, and then from the main switch it goes inside to my power cabinet, my closet. Now all ambulances have some kind of power distribution cabinet where there's a bazillion wires in there and it's very intimidating, right? So I still use some of the factory features. I use the outside scene lights rarely, and the dome lights inside the house rarely again, but those systems are still hooked up. So some of the power cabinet is still live. I have disconnected a lot of the wiring in there, so it's no longer powered. But the DC power comes from the batteries to the main switch, from the main switch into my power cabinet, and then out to all of the different 12 volt items that are in the truck. So what I did for the existing wiring that I no longer wanted to use, let's take an example. My center console, it had a whole switch panel, a whole lot of wiring in there, a wire loom about that big around, and I didn't want to use all that stuff anymore. So the first thing I did was I probed all the wires to see if there were any of them that actually had live power. And there were a couple few that still had live power. So I traced those back into the power cabinet and found where they were and then disconnected them in there. Now that wire loom that was to my center console, I trimmed it back so it's trimmed back to just behind the driver's seat. I cut the wires off and I put crimp-on terminal caps on the ends of all the wires. So even though I knew that I probed them and they didn't have any power anymore, I just felt more comfortable and terminated all of them and then zip-tied the whole thing up so that it's secure and not bouncing around. Let me just summarize again. That's kind of the details of all of the systems that I have in the truck and how they work together. One of the things I want to be really clear on, and I talked about it a lot at the beginning of the video, that an ambulance does not come to run off the batteries. It's not designed that way. So the first thing you got to get into your mind is that the batteries that are in the truck, and again, 90% of the trucks out there are this exact same way. The batteries that are in the truck are there just to crank the engine over. Leave that system alone. You're going to build a whole separate system and you're going to separate them by never connecting that main switch on the driver's seat, because that ties the two systems together. So hopefully I've given some clarity. I am always available by email. My email is in the description of all the videos. It's thecampulanceman@gmail.com. Send me any questions you have. If there's anything that I'm unclear about or you need a little further explanation, let me know. I'll be glad to share it. Again, I do these videos to help people out and so that you get a good understanding of what you're up against. It's not a mystery, and it's actually a pretty simple system once you get to learn it. And like right now, I'm not intimidated by the truck at all. I used to be electronically, and one day I finally said, you know what, I've got to go figure out where all these wires from the inverter and all that go. And I got up under there, and with the help of my daughter, actually, we started putting power to wires and probing them and multimeter testing them. And I said, this is pretty simple. I'm going to do this and this is how it's going to be wired. And that was the beginning of the end of my misunderstanding of how an ambulance is wired up. So probably the biggest hurdle to overcome is disconnecting things that you no longer want to be using. And my suggestion on that is in your power cabinet, my wiring all has printed labeling on it, and from what I've heard from other people, a lot of the ambulances, the wires are labeled, and you can trace back to your distribution cabinet and just start disconnecting wires, pulling fuses, pulling relays. You're not going to hurt anything. Just disconnect things so they're no longer powered. I've got mine down to where, again, the only things that are still powered, the scene lights, the dome lights, the rear air conditioning system, the factory one, the rear heat system, and the rear fan. Those are the only things that are still live. I don't use them all very often, but I left those things live, and all the other items have been disconnected. I still need to do some more cleanup in my distribution cabinet because it was all board based, and so I might have a board there that's totally not being used anymore. It's not powered or anything. I just need to go ahead and take it off the cabinet wall and get the wiring trimmed out of there just to clean it all up. It's not an emergency. I don't need to do it, but one of these days I'm going to get back around to that and clean some more of that stuff out of there. So let me know if you have any questions. Send me an email. Send me an Instagram message. If you could put it in the YouTube comments. I do read all the comments. I try to reply to everything. Again, if there's something that you think I'm wrong about or doesn't match up to your truck, respectfully, let me know that in the comments, okay? I'm not here as an expert about anything. I'm just hoping that I can share some of the information that I have and help you guys out. And if you have a discrepancy with what I'm talking about, let me know, and we'll discuss it, and maybe your truck is different than mine. But a lot of what I've talked about and the way my truck is designed, I know is applicable to a lot of rigs out there. They're all very, very similar, even some of the same parts. So like the main switch on the side of my seat might look identical to the one that's on yours, right? So thanks everybody again for clicking on the video and watching today. I really hope you got something out of this. If you want more of these kind of informational videos, let me know, because I got a lot of stuff cooking in the soup up here. Just don't know what needs to be shared with everybody. So thanks again. Give us a thumbs up if you like it. We'll see everybody really soon. Everybody take care and be safe. I'm a